Hey y'all, it's your boy Dagger. Welcome back to my channel. And today, I figure we take a break from the grind to focus on another hobby I have. Well, hobby, I guess well, I don't really to consider Smash a hobby per se, because I want to get good enough to be, get paid for it someday. But moving on. Another hobby of mine. Magic the Gathering. I have an account on Architect. That's a weird word to try to pronounce. Capital C, capital N, capital D, Dagger. And today, I'd figure I'll invite you to my world of Magic the Gathering. Disclaimer, obviously, like the like Smash, I am no pro, so any advice I give, don't say, "Oh, Dagger said to do this." I'm gonna say you're stupid for trusting me. Number one. Number two, go to someone else. Heck, go to the command zone. I watch them on YouTube all the time. Anyways. I put up 3 decks. This one's not been finished. But this deck I don't actually have in person, but these 3 decks I do. So we're gonna go over to Cody the Fog Machine. So a little intro to Magic for those of you who watch my videos but don't play Magic. Magic is a game where it's a card game, a trading game, a card trading game, however you call it. Anyway, sort of like a game like Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh. It's similar to that. I've been told that Magic is actually the harder version of, like, all those games, but Magic is a game where, Magic is a game, it's a game where you have resources, and you have to use those resources to get your opponent's life total down to 0. Pretty self-explanatory. And this game has 5 colors: white, blue, black, red, green. And there's many different ways or formats, if you prefer, playing Magic. The format I play is Commander. I used to play 60 card Modern or 60 card Casual, but I stopped playing it because my brother-in-law got me hooked onto it, and then after a while, we as a family we just slowly stopped. I mean, we still do, but not nearly as much as we used to play Magic. But then I started going to my local game store. And it was actually, I find Commander is a lot more fun because Commander is a game where the game is designed for a pod of 4 players. It's not 1v1. 60 card decks are 1v1, but Commander is a pod of 4. 3 or 5, every now and then maybe 6, but 4 is like the number the game, this format was designed for. So politics comes into play if you do that sort of thing. Some players don't understand it, like my sister, Levy says. But anyways, so Magic is a game where you play lands and you tap lands to produce mana or energy. For those of you who play, was it Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon? and you use that to pay into cards to play them. I know this is a very fast, rough crash course on how to play Magic, but that's pretty much the gist. And for those of you who are wondering, well, Camden. Wow, Dagger. Sorry, I don't go by my gamer name when I'm playing Magic. But they say Dagger. I'm confused. Why is there the mana color and the a number next to it? Well, so the converted mana cost of this card, let's just say, for laughs and giggles, so the total converted mana cost of this card is 7. It's not 6 whites, it's 6 of any mana of any color that a land could produce, or generic mana, for those of you who are seasoned, and then a white mana. So 6 plus 1 is 7. You have to know math when you're playing Magic, otherwise it's going to be a rough time for you. But yes, the converted mana cost is 7. Now, remember how I said getting your opponent's life total down to 0 wins the game? That is true. However, in Magic, there are many ways to win the game. For instance, this card, Approach of the Second Sun. If this was cast from your hand and you casted another spell in the Approach of the Second Sun this game, you win the game. So Magic has cards that say if you do A, B, and C, you win the game. So in other words, you have to cast it from your hand the first time, and then once you cast it the second time, you win the game. Otherwise, so if you cast it the first time, put Approach the Second Sun into its owner's library, seventh from the top. And another thing you have to keep an eye, because Magic is a very wordplay type of game. So from your hand. So if you had it in a different zone, if you will, because there's multiple different zones. There's the battlefield, there's your hand, there's exile, your graveyard, or discard pile if you prefer, and the command zone, which the game commander is based around your commander card. And you can only use colors within your commander's color identity. So you might be confused. You might be a little confused. You might say, Dagger, I'm confused. There's no color, but you can use all 5 colors because 5 colors are in his ability. So his color identity. Now if you had something, let's say, you get X, Y, and Z for each color of a spell you played. I believe you wouldn't get anything from Cody, but his color identity it's Magic has convoluted terms / rules. I mean, they try to rectify it, but the problem is the game is old and the wording changed on it through the years, and so they had to retcon a bunch of cards, and so. Oh, and cards like this with multiple of different or the same mana. So this card would just cost 2 blue, or 2 items if you prefer. But anyways, not trying to bog everyone down with rules. This is Cody the Fog Machine. So what fog means in Magic the Gathering is when you prevent combat damage, or prevent damage in general. Usually means combat damage, but it can mean damage. And the difference between the two is someone can damage you without hitting you with the creature. And the way you damage someone And the two ways you can damage someone in Magic the Gathering, just keep it for laughs and giggles. The way you can keep this, or the way you can deal damage, is, let's just say had a creature out. You say, I declare, when you go to your attack step, you declare attacker and you tap it. And you say, I'm going to attack so-and-so. And they have the option of, if they have a creature out, they can say, I declare this creature to block your creature. Or if they don't, you just deal straight up damage to them. And the damage you deal to a player is based on the first number on the creature card. Unless you have a card that says otherwise. That's like the golden rule of Magic. This rule is how the game goes unless there's on a card that says otherwise. And then this number is the toughness. Don't think of it as life. Think of it as the toughness. Half partially because of the wordplay in Magic, it says toughness of a creature, not the health of a creature. And two, it's just a lot easier to think of it when you say toughness rather than health. But anyways, so whatever creature, let's just say for instance, I swung Cody at someone and they decided to block me, the creature's first number goes to my creature's second number. And if that number is same as or equal to this number, Cody will die. But if this number is equal to or is greater than or equal to that creature's toughness, then I kill them. And then you can trade and whatever. But anyways, moving on. So, for those of you who play Magic, first of all, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and all that jazz. Ring notification bell when I go live next, because I want to do more of these videos. But this deck, because of Cody, he said I cannot cast permanent spells. Now what that means is, so what that means, I can only play instant and sorceries. And the reason for that is, instant and sorceries, when you cast / play them, there's a difference. They resolve, which means that the spell does what it's supposed to do. And then it goes directly into your discard or graveyard, whichever you prefer to call it. And then that spell is done. Now, creatures, and there's cards that are enchantments, artifacts, battles, that's a newer one though. Pretty much anything that's not a land, because lands aren't casted, they're played. You play lands for free. I believe there's no card in Magic that says you have to pay mana to put a land into play, and if it is, I believe that card probably banned anyways. Anyways, so I can't cast permanent spells. So nothing I play stays on the battlefield permanently. Except for Cody. And that's wording, you can't cast permanent spells, doesn't apply to me if he's not out on the battlefield. But once he's on the battlefield, that applies. But anyways, so this deck is centered around, like I said, fogging, or prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn. For those of you who have bad eyesight, let me help you out. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. So that means whenever someone declares creatures to attack you, you just say, in response to you declaring your attackers, I say prevent all combat damage. So no damage is dealt by their creatures, i.e. I'm not getting hit, or whatever they're targeting is not getting hit. So the only other thing that you can attack with the creature is a planeswalker. Planeswalkers are sort of like creatures. The difference is, most of the time planeswalkers are planeswalkers have abilities on them. I mean, creatures, if you build a deck right, your creatures that you have should have abilities too. But like planeswalker abilities, they usually have 2 to 3 abilities, and their toughness, if you will, is represented by a loyalty counter. And we'll get to that later. But pretty much, creatures can only attack 2 things: your planeswalkers that you or other players control. But anyways, so a lot of prevent fog cards. Now, for some reason, this is also a fog card, but it's considered a ramp. And the reason why it's considered a ramp, it says to search your library for X basic land cards, where X is the number of creatures attacking you. So let's just say, for instance, someone attacks me with 5 creatures. In response, I say, I'm going to fog you, or prevent. And not only do I prevent all combat damage, but I also search for lands. So it's a nice two-bladed, two-edged spell that because it does 2 things. And it says put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, which means that you can't use the resource from that mana until your next turn, because every one of your turns you have what's called an untap step, where you untap all your lands. Now there are cards that Magic the Gathering made that say players cannot untap more than 1 or 2 on their untap step, or it just says to skip it altogether, and that's why people don't like those players. This is a slightly better fog card to prevent all damage that be dealt to you and creatures you control this turn by creatures. Oh, wait, no, that's not. I think it's called. Yeah. So, going back to what I said. Sorry, my nose is not cooperating. Give me a second. Alright, chat. So, where was I? Oh, yes, so going back to... Okay, before we go any further. I meant to turn on some background music for myself. Alright, so going back to, remember how I said that there are 2 types of damage, combat damage, and players can cast spells to deal damage to you. Where's that? Now, this card is technically a little better for that reason, because if someone were to cast nothing but damage spells the whole game, all of these prevent all... Oh wait, no, that right control does that too. So all these cards that say prevent all combat damage would not work against damage spells. spells that just do straight up damage. But I do have a lot of counter spells. So when a spell is, so the spell goes through 2 phases or 3 phases, depending if it's a permanent spell or not. When you tap the mana and you declare the spell you're playing, and if I have the target, you have to declare the target. That spell, the card is still in the cast phase, and the spell does not gain the card's properties until it hits the second phase, which is the resolve or the playing stage. If that makes any sense. Sorry, chat. I know this is very Magic technical for those of you who don't understand. So counter target spell. So you can play this before a spell resolves. So let's just say, I played prevent all combat damage, and someone said, in response, I'm going to cancel it. Counter target spell. So what that means, the spell fizzles, i.e. doesn't happen. And then this card and the card that they use to answer go to the graveyard. Now, there are some cards that say on cast you do such and such thing, at which case, regardless if they cancel it or not, or counterspell it or not, the cast trigger still goes, but the spell itself won't. But that we'll get, if we get to that, we get to that. But just a little tidbit of information. But yeah, so anyways, trying to move on. So commander decks can only have 100 cards in them. That's including your commander. And your commander is outside of the deck in its own zone when the game starts. Now, generally, lands, depending on what your mana curve is or what's the average mana value of a card is, will determine what lands you have. Like, this is telling me that I have a lot of cards that cost 2 mana. So, 60-40 is the ratioing for lands to cards that aren't lands, is what you should have. But considering I have a lot of lower cost spells, having a lot of lands is not a problem. Matter of fact, I could probably do with a little less, but we'll get to that when we get there. And this will also show you an estimated deck value. I bought all these cards before they became the price. Some of them before they became the price that they were. Anyway, moving on. So you might say, well, Dagger, how are you going to win the game if you don't have this card out? Well, I have 2 win cons, actually. One of them is a land card, actually. So, for those of you who can't see, Mage's End enters the battlefield tapped, which means I can't use it or its ability. But I can tap it for a colorless. Or, I can tap this, return this card in my hand, search your library for a gate card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. If you control 10 or more gates with different names, you win the game. Which means, that's not a blanket ability. That just means when you activate this ability, it'll check if you have 10 or more, and then you win. And your boy has, let's go through the gates. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I guess I could just searched it. That's not a gate card. It's just reading the gate on the negate. But yeah, so I only need 10 to win the game, so if someone like destroys one of them, it's not the end of the world. But yeah. So this is a fun little deck I made. And then like I said, I have a lot of counter spells in the deck in case people don't play creatures at all, which makes like over 90% of my fog cards useless. But usually commander decks will always have at least one creature in them. Like 90% of the 85 to 90% of commander decks. The only cards that can be commanders are legendary creatures. Now, some planeswalkers, if they say you can use this card as a commander, they can use that. I.e., unless the card says otherwise, a legendary creature is going to be someone's commander. So odds are I will always have a creature swinging in my face. That and commander damage is separate damage. Well, it is and it's not. It still takes your health down, but commanders only need to hit you a total of the equivalent of 21 damage. Combat damage, not just damage. It has to be combat damage to kill you. So it's like playing a game of 21 for those of you who are basketball fans. You need to hit the hoop 21 times or get 21 points to win the game. Well, you only need 21 to kill an opponent from the commander. But yeah, so this is the deck. And there are cards in Magic that say damage can't be prevented this turn. And I also have cards for that as well. So yeah, I have a couple of stuff for that as well. But I will say the one weakness of this deck... the one weakness of this deck is if you make it to where I can't draw cards, I'm kind of screwed. Which, there are cards in Magic that do that, unfortunately. Every turn you will draw at least one card, because the turns of Magic go on tap, upkeep, draw. So everyone draws a card per turn. So yeah, so here's this deck. And then we're going to go back to my decks. This deck I don't actually have IRL. Moving on to Jared's Hatred. So I'm a firm believer, a firm Magic player believer in I see your board full of creatures and I just play a card and I get rid of all of them. I know it's kind of a flawed sense of thinking, but it works for me. Any questions or questions in the comments, make sure to please ask them. And if I don't answer them now, I will answer them later. Actually, give me 1 second, chat. Oh, chat, it's finally snowing where I live. It actually looks like frickin' winter. Let's go. Alright. So this deck is a big creature hate deck. Which, as the phrase suggests, it hates creatures. Now you might say, Dagger, how do you win the game if all you're doing is just answering other cards? This deck has 2 win cons, and this is like I said, this is a deck I actually have IRL. So this deck, I also have Approach of the Second Sun. I have Mechanized Production, which is 1, and I also have, where is it at? Might be under Ramp. Revel and Riches. For those of you who can't read. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap and sacrifice this artifact. So it has to be untapped in order for you to use it. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. So, remember how I said the beginning of your turn goes untap, upkeep, draw? Well, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 8 on a check, if you have 10 or more, you win the game. So that's a win con. And I also have Mechanized Production. Enchant artifact you control. So as long as it's on your side of the field, and it's an artifact, you can enchant it. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of an enchanted artifact. Then if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as one another, you win the game. So again, another upkeep trigger. So check if you have 8 or more, then you win the game. So those are the 3 win cons for this deck. Now, if somehow, someway, all of these were answered and I had no way of getting them back onto the field and or into my hand, I do have another win con that takes a little while longer to make me win the game. So it's kind of a combination of 2 cards. So my commander, Jared, and he is a Planeswalker. And it does say he can be your commander. So remember I was talking about the loyalty counters? So that's kind of like his toughness. And once it hits 0, I put him into the discard pile. Or graveyard if you prefer. But since he's my commander, I can choose to put him back in the command zone. The trade-off is if you put him, you have to pay 2 mana, or the converted mana cost is just plus 2 more generic mana for each time that you cast it in this game. So he died once, he costs 7, so all 5 colors plus 2 generic. And then if he dies again, that's 9, 11, 13th, and so forth. But he can be my commander, so the trade-off is I don't have a creature that I can deal only 21 damage to kill someone with, but he creates me creature tokens, or a creature token, that's all colors with trample. His second ability is choose up to 2 target creatures for each of them. Put a number of 1/1 counters on equal to the number of colors it is. So that second ability I'm never ever really going to use. But his -6 ability. Return target multicolored card from your graveyard to your hand. So that means if it only costs 1 type of color mana, I can't target it with the ability. And it has to have like a white and a blue, or a blue and a black. You get the gist. It has to have at least 2 different colors. If that card was all colors, draw a card and create 2 treasure tokens. Now, remember how the 2 of my win cons were based around treasure tokens? Well, that kind of works with, the more treasure tokens I have, the closer I am to winning the game. So, if for whatever reason, all of the treasure... Oh, or sorry, not the treasures. If all of the win cons in my deck were gone, I can keep returning this card, because it's all 5 colors, back to my hand, and getting 2 treasure tokens, which means that this spell, in a way, costs 2 less. But last stand. Target opponent loses 2 life for each swamp you control. Last stand deals damage equal to target creature equal number of mountains you control. And then you create a 1/1 green sapling token for each forest you control. You gain 2 life for each plane you control. And you draw a card for each island you control, then discard that many cards. So, pretty much, I can keep recurring this from the discard pile and play it a couple times a turn depending on how much lands I have at a discount price after the first time, because treasures tap and sack to add mana to mana pool of any color. And eventually I can drain someone out with the first one. Target opponent loses 2 life for each swamp you control. So that is the way to win with this deck, or the win con. And then these are creature token cards. They are creatures that cards make, but they're not actually in the deck. I put them in the sideboard because this website doesn't recognize them as tokens, and tokens can not be anywhere but on the battlefield, because if they go to another zone, they automatically die. But yeah, so the reason why this deck is a creature hate deck, but it creates a lot of tokens, because I have cards in here. Spreading Plague. Whenever a creature comes into play, destroy all the creatures that share a color with it. Now, this is a black creature. That's a treasure token. That's not a creature. The servos is colorless. The mirrors are colorless, but this is all colors. And then this spear token is a colorless token. But this one, the Kavu, I think it's pronounced. This creature is all colors. So my commander makes that, and I will always have access to my commander as long as I keep it in the command zone or on the field. And as long as I have Spreading Plague out, I just have to +1 him to create a Kavu, and I destroy all creatures that share color with it, and since it's all colors, it destroys everything. That's a creature. So that is one way. If my commander is not out, however, I do have Darkest Hour. All creatures are black, so if all creatures share color with each other, it doesn't matter what creature comes into play, they'll just continuously be wiping. Another card combo. So Humility. Each creature loses all abilities, and it is a 1/1 creature. So it pretty much makes everything a pawn. Or very, very tillable. Combo this with... I have 2 cards that do it. Night of Soul Betrayal. All creatures get -1/-1. Or... I have another one. Anthem. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Don't really care about that. Creatures your opponents control get -1/-1. So if Humility says, everything's a 1/1, and this says they all get -1/-1, everything automatically just dies. It enters the field, but it dies. And then there's a second ability on here. that creates a creature token, which again can combo with Spreading Plague. Or, if I don't have it out, creature tokens can still block and such. So, even if I don't have Spreading Plague out, or something that has an effect like Spreading Plague, it can still be used as a blocker, so. But here's the actual wording. When it comes into play, destroy all the creatures that share color with it. They can be regenerated part. There's ability magic for creatures, and it's usually on creatures, but there are cards that let you do it for any permanent. That say if regenerate says if this thing would be destroyed, instead tap it and remove all damage from it this turn. So it stays on the field, but that makes it to where they can't do that. I also have Lethal Vapors. Whenever a creature comes into play, destroy it. Just outright destroys it. Now, any player can pay 0 to destroy this card. You skip your next turn. So that's the trade-off from destroying it. Other cards that nerf creatures. Overwhelming Splendor. Enchant player. So this is like humility, but for one player. So all the creatures that player controls loses all abilities and have base power toughness 1/1. So that does it, like I said, to a single player, but it does the same thing. And it also has enchanted player can activate abilities that aren't mana abilities or loyal abilities. That one I find is not much of a problem. Unless they're playing like a heavy activated ability deck. So. What else we got here? So there's a lot of cards that combo each other to make it to where creatures are pointless / useless / non-existent. So that's the base of this deck. Oh, and creature your opponent's control get -1/-0, so useless. And I also have other cards that Propaganda, great example. So creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control that's attacking you. So pretty much they declare the attacker and say, you know, I'm attacking you. They can't do that unless they pay 2 if this card's out on the field. Now, the problem with this card, or cards, pretty much a lot of cards in this deck, the problem with it, creatures are the general way of winning. So there's a lot of people that are not going to let it stay, and they're going to answer it with something like a... where's that? So, Forsaken the Worldly. Exile target, for those of you who can't see, exile target artifact or enchantment. So cards like that can get rid of my stuff. The protection I have in this deck for that kind of stuff. Where's it at? Did I pass it? Protection, here we go. So, cards like Stealing Grove. Other enchantments you control have Shroud. For those of you who can't see. Now, they can't be targets be the targets of spells or abilities. Remember how I said Magic is a very worded play game? Well, that last card we saw said target artifact enchantment. Well, this says that it can be targeted. Now, it says other enchantments. So this card itself can be targeted, but the thing is, after they kill this card, they need another card for the artifact and/or no, it says just the enchantments. Sorry, they need another card for the enchantments that you control, like the specific one they want to answer. And then it has another ability: sacrifice this card, search library for enchantment card, reveal it, then shuffle and put the card on top. So it searches, or as us Magic players like to call it, tutor a card. And I also have a card called other permanents you control of hexproof. So this hits everything that's not an enchantment. That's not just an enchantment. So it's pretty nice. And then I have cards that say if a creature or a source would deal damage to you, prevent one of that damage, and then you have hexproof, you can't be targeted, which is pretty nice. So yeah, that is Jared's Hatred, as I titled it. So here it is. And then there's other combo cards that just don't let me to get hit at all. So a combo I have in here, for instance, Web of Inertia. At the beginning of each opponent's combat phase, so when a player goes into their combat phase, that player may remove a card in his or her graveyard from the game. If that player does it, creatures he or she controls can't attack you this turn. So, their player's graveyard or discard pile, where cards go once they die or played, depending on the type of card. They may exile one of them or remove from the game. Remove a card from his. Removing a card was the old wording for exile. Exile is just another. It's like the graveyard, except there's hardly any cards that can bring it back from exile. I think there's only one I can think of. But outside of that, it's like near impossible to return from exile. It's a more permanent way of dealing with things. But this card combos with, might be in stacks. Yeah, Landline of the Void. So we'll get to the first part here in a second. But this second part says, if a card would put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile instead. Which means, unless there was a card in the graveyard prior to this hitting the field, they would have no cards in graveyard to exile, because they're already exiled. And then the first part says, if this is your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. There are they're called lane lines. There's like 2 for each color. But this is arguably one of the better ones. I wouldn't even say arguably. It is one of the better ones. But this combined with the last card means that unless they answer this card, cards can't go into the graveyard because they get exiled instead. So combos like that to where people can't hit me. But yeah, so here it is. And again, any questions or comments or concerns, just make sure to put them in the comments below, and I'll try to get to them as soon as I can. So yeah, so this is a creature hate deck. Going back. So, we're going to get into another deck I have IRL. And I will return after I use the facilities one more time. But yeah, so give me 1 second. Oh, sorry, chat. I forgot to bring my actual deck box over, so I don't forget any cards. 1 second. Oh, where are you at? Ah, here we go. Alright, chat. So, this is a deck, another deck I have IRL. So I titled this one High Tier Mill Deck. So, what mill means in Magic. So, a state-based action, which means it checks whenever you draw. It checks whenever it comes up ever. Unless there's a card that says otherwise. So, state-based action for drawing states. If you draw a card from your library and there is no cards left in it at the time that you would draw the card, or draw a card, you lose the game. Now, there are certain cards that get around it by making it to where players can't draw cards, or instead of drawing, you can do this, or there are certain cards that say, instead of losing, you win the game. So, what a mill deck does, so takes all of your 99 cards, or if you want to get technical, every match you start off with 7 cards in hand, plus your commander, that's 8, so 92 cards if you want to be specific about it. But the goal of the mill deck is it doesn't care about your life total. It just wants to get you down to the point to where you draw without any cards in your deck and you lose the game. So, I kind of list a high tier mill deck because, in my opinion, I think Xur is a great mill deck. A mill deck commander. So, we're going to start this off with cards I already know for a fact are in this deck. So to give you an example of a card, so thing I forgot to tell you guys. When someone says you mill them any cards in Magic language, that says you're putting X cards, like this card for instance, 10 cards. So that means you put 10 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard or discard pile. So we're trying to mill as many cards from people's libraries as possible. So, the reason why this card is worth a little bit, $2.79, so probably around like $2.50, $3, depending on what the quality of the card is, like if it's scratched or not. But anyways, target player mills 10 cards. Now in Magic, for 2 minutes, for target player to mill 10 cards is pretty good. Not as good in Commander. It's better in 60 card decks because, as the number suggests, there's less cards and it's 53 cards compared to 92 cards. So, but target player mills 10 cards. It's a nice cheap spell. Mills 10 cards. Pretty alright card. But then we get cards like this. So, target opponent reveals cards, which means they flip the cards over from the top of their library, and everyone sees what they're revealing, or sees what the card is, until 4 land cards are revealed. That could mean basics, special, any type of card that has land right here on the card. And then, after they're all revealed, that player puts all cards into their graveyard or discard pile. For 3 mana, you're hitting till 4 lands. So, depending on how the cards fall, you're not just hitting 4 cards, you're going to hit more than 4 cards, usually. And the reason why I think Xur is a great mill commander is actually not because of those cards that I just put in. Actually, it's because there's a lot of milling cards that are enchantments that are 3 or less and put on the battlefield and shuffle. And that happens whenever Xur, the enchanter, attacks. So, examples. Hold on, I can't spell it correctly. Back to my deck here. Sorry, chat. Okay, it's PSY. Okay. Alright, so site correction states whenever you draw a card, each opponent puts the top 2 cards in the library into their graveyard. Or mills 2 cards. And it is 3 or less. So, this counts for even the card you draw on your turn, you're milling everyone for 2. And even if your opponent has hexproof, it still mills the card. Mills the top 2 cards. And the fact that it triggers on a draw is very nice. Now, a very good card that this combos with is Risk Study, which states when our opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. So, this is kind of an annoying card in the sense of you have to keep asking people whenever they cast a spell before the spell resolves or the permanent enters, do you want to pay the 1? And if they don't, then you draw. Not only do you get more cards into your hand, but you're milling them for 2 as well. And that happens before whatever spell they're casting resolves, which is nice. Other examples of mill enchantments. Sphinx Tutelage. Whenever, for those of you who can't read, or see, sorry. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent, so you have to target someone. It's not every opponent. Put the top 2 cards of their library into the graveyard, or mills 2. If they're both non-white colors that share a color, repeat this process. So, lands are not considered color permanents. Despite what they tap for, they are not considered color permanents. So pretty much, a non-land card. So for instance, let's just say I milled someone. They milled the top 2 were Glimpse Unthinkable and Mind Funeral. They would do it again, so just the top 2, until they pulled cards that did not share the color in their mana symbol. So let's just say, for instance, they milled the second one was Sphinx Tutelage and a card with just white in its mana cost. Then they would stop. But when you're you can target a monocolor decks or decks that only have one color in their commander's identity. Let's say, for instance, it was like a white commander, because you have more of a probability of them pulling the same colored card. Oh, and if I haven't said already, your commander's color identity are the only colors you can play. So I can only play white, blue, black. Let's see here. Other good examples of mill enchantments. Oh, Teferi is only 1F. I think it's Ancient Sensei? No, but that's... Actually, that card wouldn't work, because it's 4 mana. Sorry, chat, that's the wrong one I was looking for. Oh. There it is. Alright. So, this one states, enter the battlefield, draw a card, then discard a card. Whenever you draw a card, tell your opponent mills 2. So instead of every opponent, it's just one player. But the thing is, it's sort of a self-sustaining card in a way, because it does the thing that it triggers off of, which is drawing cards. Go into ETBs or enter the battlefield. So after the spell resolves, draw a card and discard a card. And then you have lower tier cards that do it as well. Whenever you draw a card, target player puts the top card in. So it costs one less mana to play, but you only get one opponent milling one card. So it is what it is. But just to speed this up. Oh, that's a great card. This card, whenever creature card, put an opponent's graveyard. From anywhere, you gain a life. Sucks against other people's... Oh, shit. Well, it sucks against decks that don't have a lot of creatures. But generally, there's one deck in your pod that'll... Or at least 2 decks in your pod that'll use creatures to win the game. So, I think it's an underrated mill card, but that's just me. Well, life gain, but centered around milling. And that, opponent's graveyard from anywhere. So if you board white, for instance, this card... Destroy all creatures. So, if you were to board white with Profane Memento being out, you would gain life equal to how many creatures died, essentially. They can be regenerated. So, denies them coming back to regenerate. Draw a card for each creature destroyed this way. Which, that also combos with all of these draw enchantments. Fun fact, I have yet to get that combo off. But this card's mana cost is 8. Now I could cycle this, discard this card, draw a card, and I would still get the draw ability at least once. But compared to draw a card for each creature destroyed this way, so it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter how many creatures. It matters how many creatures died, and I draw a card for each. But the cycling, cycling means you discard this card to draw a card, and you pay cycle cost. But when you cycle this card, all creatures get -2/-2 till end turn. So if their toughness hits 0 with this card, you can still get the graveyard triggers. Oh, I do have propaganda in here as well. Really the top 10 cards, so everyone can see them. For each blue mana symbol and the mana cost of the reveal cards. So every time this mana symbol on these cards comes up in the 10 that you reveal, target opponent puts the top card into his or her graveyard, and then you shuffle them in random order and put them on the bottom of your deck. And there are a lot of cards in this deck that have the blue mana symbol, so it's worth it. Oh. And all the enchantments cost 3 or less. You kind of have to make sure it synergizes well. This card is it's nice because I can not only target player's hand, but I can instead choose to target their graveyard. So say for instance I mill a really good card in their graveyard, and I don't want them to get that back. I can choose to target that card and exile it. So this is a really good card, at least in 60 card decks. But in Commander, it's still a good card, just not as effective. So, it reads, if an opponent searches your library this turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay this card's mana cost, which is 5. Target opponent mills the top 13. For a potential 0, 13, that's a steal. And cards that help do that. Did I spell that right? I did not spell that right. Scheme of Symmetry. Choose 2 target players. So you don't even have to target yourself if you want. Each of them searches the library for a card. then shuffles the library and puts that on top. So you don't even have to target the player that searched. You just say, hey, you know, it'd be cool if me and you searched. However, I don't want this other player to get a card or win. Or I want to kill them first. So after this spell resolves, you then play Archive Trap to mill the top 13, all for 1 mana of playing the Scheming Symmetry. Other cards that help you do this. Exile target creature. Its controller may search. So the problem with this card, whenever a card says may, that means they don't have to do that. But again, if people know you have this card in their deck and you target their shit, odds are they're not going to opt to search if it's a may ability. Scheming Symmetry is not a may ability. They have to. It says they do it. It's not a may. So a way to play this out is if you want to target someone else that's just stuck on lands, or they're mana dry, they don't have a lot of lands because they're not drawing it. You can say, hey, I'll take out one of your stuff, but I can give you land. And then you target whoever you want to target with Archive Trap. I have one more card, I think, that does this. Where you at? It's a land card, actually. Where are you at? There it is. Feel of Ruin. So, this is a land card. Taps at a generic mana to mana pool. So a colorless. Or, you can tap this, sacrifice this card. Destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls. Each player searches. So it's not a may ability. They have to do it. And puts that card, for a basic land card, and puts that card on the battlefield that shuffles. So that's another way to combo. So pretty much for 3 mana, you do it. It's better to do it combined with Scheming Symmetry. But an important part of a commander deck, your draw power. How fast you can draw through your deck. There it is. Thought Scour. So, target player mills 2 cards. Draw a card. For 1 mana, works pretty well. Pilfer Plans. Target player mills 2 cards, and then you draw 2 cards. For 3 mana. And again, I actually have this deck IRL, so Sorry, chat. Looking for... Oh, this is... I think I have it in the deck. Just making sure I have it in the actual physical deck here. Yep, Toskower is there. Oh, this is kind of like a mill only draw card, or a draw card to play later in the game. So for 1 mana, Visions of the Beyond, draw a card. So regardless of the rest of this card's ability, you are at least drawing 1 card for 1 mana. Now, if a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, draw 3 cards instead. Which in a mill deck is very easy to mill that many cards from a player. So for 1 mana, you're drawing 3 cards. And if you have any of your mill enchantments out, you're going to mill for 3 or more. Because each mill enchantment is either 1 or majority of them are 2. So, milling 6 cards with 1 mana. Pretty good. Again, have to have all the cards out, blah, blah, blah. But when your commander can search for them with the enchantment cards, you at least will have half of that card combo. And I thought I had Brainstorm in this deck. Apparently I do not. Must have got rid of it. Yeah, I must have got rid of it. Oh well. Traumatize. Dagger player puts half his or her library rounded down. So if it's an odd number left, you round down into his or her graveyard. Which combos with Fraying Sanity. Beginning of each end step, enchanted player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is the number of cards they. So essentially, it's a mill doubler for a player that you curse. So, regardless if you actually milled them or you board wiped and a bunch of creatures / other permanents go into their graveyard, this triggers. So, if you have their library, it's going to put the other half in at the end step. Now, the only saving grace a player has against this is if it's an odd number, so you will only mill half rounded down. So if it's an odd number, will mill until there's 1 more card left. So that's one saving grace. Another saving grace. This isn't part of the deck, but just an example. Yeah. So, just for example. So, the ability on this card that we're worried about is this one. So it says, when God's Blessing is put into your graveyard from your library, shuffle your graveyard into your library. So, this card pretty much has a state-based action. If it comes from your library into your discard / graveyard, whatever you want to call it, this card will trigger and put all your cards in your graveyard, including this card, back into your library. So no matter how many times you get milled, or no matter how many cards you get milled, this card will go with your graveyard back into your library. So you're pretty much immune to milling. The way around this I have a bunch of cards to get around this. There's a couple cards around this. A very good card and a very common card now. Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Oh, my bad. Each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until that player has exiled cards with total mana value 20 or more. What that means, the converted mana cost on the card, the sum total of all the ones that are exiled has to hit 20 and then they stop. Lands don't count for any mana. They're 0, essentially. So, if you hit... So, you're trying to hit the card that makes them immune to milling with this card. So that's a card to get around that. I have a few other cards to get around this. I just saw you. Counter target activate ability, trigger ability, or legendary spell. So the ruling we're looking for here is triggered ability. Because it's not activated, a player didn't activate it. It's something that's like a blanket ability, it'll trigger no matter what you do. So, when you play this card, if that card or card like that hits the graveyard, you say in response, tap a blue and another. Counter, you have to state, I'm countering the ability that mills it, reshuffles your graveyard into your library. And so you say, I will respond with countering that ability. So pretty much, it doesn't trigger, and the graveyard doesn't get reshuffled. So there is a third way that doesn't really answer the card. It just makes it to where there's less cards for it to be reshuffled. And that is exiling someone's graveyard. I believe I have one here. Here we go. So, Ravenous Trap. If your opponent had 3 more cards put into the graveyard from anywhere this turn, you may pay 0. So, just like the Archive Trap, you have an option to pay 0. Exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So, before you start milling someone, if you think that, well, okay, technically you still have to mill them a little bit, but it's going to require a little bit of luck. But pretty much, you mill anyone for 3. Heck, it doesn't even have to be the player that has a card that does it. Just mill someone for 3 or more. Target that same player or another player. Or even yourself if you really want to. And then you exile their graveyard. So if you have a whole bunch of cards in someone's graveyard that you milled, and you don't want them to reshuffle because it's gonna make you have to work twice as hard to get it back, their graveyard back to where it was, you exile it. And they can't touch those cards. They won't reshuffle because they're in exile. And those are the ways. Oh, and I have one more card that does it a different way too. Is an enchantment card, so you can search for it. It's a... If you're playing in a competitive game, this is arguably a safe bet, other than Risk Study, because Risk Study can get you more cards. But this one states, when our opponent shuffles his or her library, so there's a lot of tutor cards in Magic that say that don't put the card into your hand, it puts it on top of your library. So you search for the card, shuffle the library, and then put that card on that you search for on top of your library. So you know you're gonna, get that card. Make sure to have this out, because when our opponent shuffles his or her library, you may look at the top 2 cards of that library. Then you may exile one of those cards, but put the rest on top. So if someone, even if they play a tutor card that put the card directly in their hand, you still have the option, whenever someone shuffles, to look at the top 2 and exile 1 card. And you could potentially exile that card that keeps you from killing them. Potentially. But it is another way of going about it. And then I have one other way too. So, name a non-artifact non-land card. Search target player's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that name and exile them. So this card is better in a 60-card deck, because in 60-card decks, you can play up to 4 of the same copies of a certain card, but in Commander, you can only play 1 copy per card. I guess I should have said that earlier in the video, but I digress. So if you know... So on cast, you have to name the card. Now, if you're in a pay-to-play, you have to name the card exactly. But if you're just playing for funsies, no one's going to really care a whole lot if you get the name a little bit wrong. But the ruling does state you have to get the name exactly correct. But the names of these cards that make it to where it reshuffles is easy enough to say. So you get to search for this card. You get to search the graveyard, hand, and library for any number of the cards with the same name and exile them. Now, even if you mess up, say the wrong name, or pronounce it the wrong way, you still get to look through their deck and see what they have. How the deck works, yada yada yada. Now, in a pay-to-play match, I would suggest that when you play this card, you write down the cards that can stop you from winning the game, so you don't mispronounce them, or type it on your phone, something. Now, if you have if you play this card when Psych Surgery is out, when an opponent shuffles their library. And this card makes them shuffle. Because whenever someone looks through a deck, whether it be theirs or someone else, that deck always has to be reshuffled because you know what cards you're going to draw. It's just like a magic staple whenever you tutor. Skimming Symmetry also does the same thing. So it can combo with Psych Surgery. And you can exile the card that they search for if you so choose to do so. Or another card that's underneath it in their deck. So yeah, those are ways to get around cards that reshuffle or just getting rid of big threats before they even get into the player's hand. And this card states that it exiles it. So, clicked it. So, that is how a mill deck works and how I made this deck. Now, I will say, for those of you who don't know, usually if you want to be good at or not be good, if you want to have a higher chance of winning and/or become a professional at this, unfortunately, you're going to have to spend a good penny. Now, this commander, my brother-in-law made a deck with this card. And he made the deck really cheaply, but the ability, because of how the card works, the deck was still good. And there are certain commanders that, even if you don't put a lot of money into it, they can still be good. Competitive good. There are a lot of cards that are like that. But there are some. Xur is one of them. So yes, so if you want to be good, or competitive worthy, you might have, odds are you're going to have to spend a hefty amount of money. And I don't even have all the cards in here. And we're already up to almost $100. Gonna be $100 by the time, over $100. By the time you spend money on shipping and all that, and sales tax. So yeah, in the next video I will have this deck finished, and then you guys, if you even have Architect, you can search up my name and see yourselves. And I'll have all the lands and everything. Oh, basic lands. I forgot to say this. You can have any number of basic lands in a deck. I forgot to say that. Because basic lands help you play the game. And if you can only have one of each, that's kind of BS. But yeah. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, ring the notification bell, like the video, please. Be very much help. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, I plan on making more of these. And yeah, and I will make sure, because I'm realizing that actually putting the cards in is very time consuming for a video, so I think I'll just put a bunch of decks up and just do them in waves. So the next video, I have 4 mill decks, so I'll put them all up on this website and go through them with you guys. But yeah, peace out guys, take care, stay warm. Snow's hit here, so yeah, take care.